What is classical Christian education? Today I want to define for you and stipulate what I mean when I say classical Christian education so that you have a definition that works and it will actually give you an introduction to sort of the big picture of what classical Christian education is all about. So let's break it down. It's classical Christian education. What is education? What is your philosophy of education? What do you aim to achieve in the instruction and the upbringing of your child? Education, from a classical Christian perspective, is designed to cultivate wisdom and virtue in a child. Education is the instruction to the end that the child's loves would be fully developed. We do this by teaching the mind and training the heart so the hands will work and do that which is good. So if I had to give a really short, bring it way down to what is education, what's the goal, what is education? It's the instruction of a child's heart, the formation of their loves. That's what education is. It's the formation of a child's loves. So what is classical Christian education? Well, it's classical, and by this we stipulate what we mean. Classical education as opposed to modern education. Classical as opposed to the philosophy of education proposed and propagated by the moderns. It's classical in that it harkens back to another time where things were done differently. It's classical in that it centers around or utilizes the great books of Western civilization. Classical education recognizes that we're not born in a vacuum, that there's a stream of consciousness or a stream of works which brought us to where we are. It sees Western civilization as not something to be fought against or disregarded, but it sees Western civilization or Western culture as being that which produced us. So we look back, we don't recognize all of it as being good, but we pick out those good parts, the major works of Western civilization, and we use those in educating our children, in cultivating wisdom and virtue, and really forming, I'll throw that back again, the education is forming the loves. Okay, it's also classical in the sense that it recognizes 3 different stages of child development and caters curriculum to meet the child at each of those particular stages. Those 3 stages are the grammar stage, the logic stage, or the dialectic stage, and the rhetoric stage. We're not going to necessarily get into that right now, but hopefully in the future we will. So it acknowledges, so what is classical education? It's as opposed to modernity, not that it's against everything that's modern, but it's a philosophy of education of the past. One that recognizes where we are. It doesn't despise other cultures. In fact, by teaching an appreciation of your own culture, that is the Western culture for us here, you actually get to appreciate other cultures better. The love for your own mother, or that which brought you forth into the world, doesn't cause you to hate other mothers. But if you truly love your own mother, and the more you love her, the more you will appreciate someone else's love for their mother. And so as Western heritage, Western civilization has brought us, or Americans, to where we are right now, and it's not all good, but understanding how it brought us to where we are doesn't cause us to hate other cultures or to hate people who love their cultures. We can see, acknowledge, and appreciate other people's loves for their culture. So it's classical in that sense, that acknowledges the great works of Western civilization and uses those to teach the students. And it's also classical in the sense of espousing Dorothy Sayers' sort of delineation of the 3 stages of child development and catering curriculum to meet a child at each of those specific stages. Last point. It's classical education, but it's not just classical education. It's classical Christian education. It's Christian in the sense that it has Christ to be the center. Now, we can mean a lot of different things when we say that Christ is the center. For example, is Christ the center, as in he's the bullseye? He's the middle of the target that we're aiming for? Well, Christ is the center in that sense. Certainly what we aim to cultivate in our children and in ourselves. But that's not what I mean by Christian. Is it Christian in the sense of like Christ is the center, as in the center of the vase at the center of a table? Is he center in that he's beautiful, he's at the middle of the table, the vase of flowers at the center of the table, beautiful but not really necessary? As in, is classical Christian education just the same as another education, but we add a little Jesus in there to make it a little bit different? We add prayer and Bible in, and so accept everything else? Well, certainly not. Classical Christian education places Christ at the center, as a hub is the center of a wheel, as an axle is the center of a drivetrain. So Christ is the center, and that he is the integrating principle of all things. Christ is the center of education in the sense that we look to him as the one by whom all things consist. We look at God, or the God revealed in Jesus Christ, as the God which and in whom we live, move, and have our beings. The God who built all things. So it's classical in the sense that it acknowledges Western culture has brought us forth, and it uses the great works, and acknowledging the 3 stages of child development: grammar, dialectic, and rhetoric. It's Christian in the sense that it acknowledges the integrating principle as the one whom built all things and in whom we live and move and have our being. And it's education in the sense that it aims to cultivate a child's loves so that they love what is lovely, they love what is good and true and beautiful. But we'll get more into that hopefully in the future when we look at those 3 stages: grammar, logic, or dialectic, and rhetoric. But for now, I'll leave you with that. That's the definition of classical Christian education. I wish you well.